Hi, everyone, and welcome to Get Hired Live. I'm your host, Andrew Seaman, LinkedIn's managing editor for jobs and career development. I'm so happy that you're joining us. As always, if you're new here, this is a time when we get together, we learn a little bit about job searching, your career, and everything in between. So, as always, I want to start off by asking you to introduce yourselves, whether you're new here or you've been here before. Tell us a little bit about yourself in the comments. Tell us maybe if you're looking for a new job, where you're from, or maybe you're looking to get a promotion at your job, you're looking to move into a new field. Whatever it is you're aiming for, tell us in the comments. And we already have so many people there. We have Yolanda from Texas, Wendy from New Jersey, Isaac from Ghana. We have Scott from Illinois. We have Justice from Tennessee. And I think I saw Dolores, Minerva, and a few other people in there as well. So keep getting your introductions in there. And then get your questions in, especially about job searching, because we have a fantastic guest today. So make sure that you're really introducing yourselves, you're connecting with other people. Maybe you see someone in the comments who lives in your same geographic area. Maybe they work in the industry that you work in. Maybe they work in the industry you want to work in. Build those professional connections and make sure you're building those bridges, because really a network is the foundation of a successful job search and career. And there's no better time to start than right now. And, I'm coming to you from a very cold New York City and actually in the Empire State Building. But our guest today is up early and joining us from California. So I want to welcome her to the screen, Brittany Swan, who's an executive recruiter and resume writer. Welcome, Brittany.
Hello, Andrew. Thank you for having me.
Yes, thank you for joining us. I'm so excited that you're here. And today we are talking all about how recruiters read resumes. And I know that there's probably people watching this or who will watch this who are going to snicker a little bit, because they're going to say, recruiters don't read resumes. There's computers that do that. So the first question, do recruiters read resumes?
Absolutely. It's pretty hefty part of my job. I review every single application that comes my way. I have to legally. The only time I will not read a resume, and there's a big difference between the application and the resume, is if I can see immediately within the application they do not legally apply. Via geographics, they need sponsorship or critical screening questions. But yes, every single application, every single resume is reviewed by an actual person. And if they did not, it would be against the EEOC here in the US. So legally, we have to review every application before rejecting them.
Exactly. Yeah, definitely. And I know, just talking to recruiters, that I've encountered over the years, and I encounter quite a few, they've all said that they do read the resumes, even ones that seem to get rejected or something like that. They're the ones who are reading them, doing a scan physically to make sure that, they're not missing any good talent. And I know we have a lot of people in the comments who are probably looking for work now, and, they're wondering how the process works. So that's a great insight into what happens behind the scenes. And I just want to take a moment to say hi to a few more people who are joining us. We have Santosh from Algeria. We have Amir from Dubai. We have Susan from Texas. We have Edward from Amsterdam, beautiful city. Lance across the river from where I am in Brooklyn. We have Letitia from Los Angeles, Shree from Chicago, and Sloan from Tennessee. So welcome to all of you. And like I said, get your questions in about the job search process, about the hiring process, how recruiters do their jobs, because we're going to get to those in just a little bit. Now, Brittany, my next question for you is basically, what about those applicant tracking systems, those resume sorting robots that we've heard about? What's the deal with those? Because people often think that these, artificial intelligence creatures are basically the ones pulling all the strings in the hiring process, but that's not the case, is it?
No, I mean, they're not taking over. They're not they're not some evil alien planet coming down and zipping job seekers. So I do see a lot of misinformation out there, either from job coaches without any recruitment experience, or just things that job seekers think are true based on why they think they're not being selected for an interview. The ATS system is simply an electronic file cabinet for me that just organize everybody that's applied through all these different websites into one house for me. So if you look at it, it's like a Google email without the trash or spam folder, because those would be illegal. So the ATS system does not reject anyone unless someone is physically telling it to. And some candidates will say, well, literally right when I applied, I got rejected. Well, that was either one, someone was literally in time and saw your application and rejected you, or after the application, you answered screening questions that legally rejected you out again. And again, that sponsorship, geographical location, education, and then other screening questions that are non-negotiable for that role.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point. And I always tell people the one thing that you need to know about the applicant tracking system is that when you're entering your information online, whether it's a company's website, whether it's somewhere else, you're actually interacting with the applicant tracking system. It's just that you're inputting the information into it like you would Excel, and then it puts it into where it needs to be. So always read the instructions carefully, because like you said, there could be knockout questions that are really important. So if it says, are you eligible to work in the United States? And you say no, but that is a requirement, then you might just get that automatic denial. Or there might be special certifications, right? Where the US government says, listen, before you even bring the applicants in, they have to meet this criteria, right?
Yeah, like an SCI or TSI. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And a lot of people will ask, like, why do I even need to upload my resume if it's there? Your resume is a marketing tool, which is really important to know. But when you upload it into the ATS, it makes it a legal document. So that is why you have to upload those and make sure it's entered individually, because it's a legal aspect.
Yeah. And even when people say they're going to get you around the applicant tracking system, at some point in the process, your information has to go in there, right?
Yeah. At some point, you're going to talk to a recruiter, or we're going to take your resume and enter everything for you. But you are into the system no matter what. And jumping over hiring managers, they have their own job as engineers or physicians or whatever they're doing. So they're probably just going to hop you right back over to us.
Yeah, definitely. And, we have so many questions coming in. So I want to get back to the topic at hand. And also, Summer did say, wow, I never realized that you have to review all the resumes. That must be really overwhelming.
Yeah.
So, getting back to the topic at hand, when you, as a recruiter, open a resume or you see the information in the ATS, how do you actually review it? Like, what are you looking for? What do people need to know to make sure that they're showing they really are the best applicant, or at least one of the best applicants for a job?
Yeah, well, I think it's really, even as a resume writer, I'm saying this, the resume is sometimes the last thing we see. When we click on you, it shows everything that you've entered into the system, either via parsing of your resume or manually. And so I will see where you're from, your screening questions, and anything that you put into the ATS, and then I download your resume. So that it's really important to know that your resume might be the last thing that's being seen. So when we go into there and we look at a resume, we're looking for hard skills only. We're not looking for if you're dedicated or have great interpersonal skills. Half time I get off the phone and it's very clear you don't have great interpersonal skills, which is fine. But don't put that on your resume. I need to know your years of experience. I'm looking for your education. I'm looking for certs, licenses, and technology in that order. Years, education, certs and licenses, and technologies. Always in that order, because those will be the mandatory things on the job description. It also aligns with OFCCP compliance. So if your company that you're working for received government or federal funding at any point of startup or scaling, they are usually under the OFCCP regarded, which means they could say you need a bachelor for this job, and then the company can come in and say, oh, and Salesforce, and we want them to have this type of leadership. Now, on the resume, if we're also looking for a chief executive or someone in a management or leadership, we will look at those statistics first, as well as top of years of experience, education, certs, and technologies. So when people come up to me and they're like, I'm a CEO, I say a 5 or 50, because those are different jobs, different salary, different education in the business. So those are the things that we look for immediately as the non-negotiables of what the hiring manager has specifically told us, or the OFCCP job description guidelines. That is it. I look at those things immediately. We do not read your resume until we know you are qualified.
Yeah. And also, what people should probably know is that y- in the HR world, in the recruiting world, there's the idea of the talent funnel. And it really is a funnel because you're going from maybe a batch of 1,200 resumes or 1,200 applications, and you're really doing a very sort of top level look and saying, okay, do they meet the minimum requirements? And then every time you get to that next level, you start sort of broadening your view, right? So then you'll look at the actual resume. Then, if you get far enough along and you're almost at the hiring process, that's when you might get the background check. So it's almost the farther down the funnel you get as an applicant, the more they actually take a look at you, right?
That is literally spot on. So once I know you're qualified is when I'll actually take the time and go through your actual personal experience, your own internal movements, your professional values of what, those things that you actually did in the company. So not the duties, your actual achievements. And those are kind of things that I'll make, screening calls and things like that. But it is really important to know that we will not read your document until we know you're qualified. So not hiding those top 5 key points in the professional experience piece to help me find is very critical, because other applicants might be seeing these things very quickly. And I'm like, all right, this person qualifies, this person qualifies. But if you're expecting me to see that you have Tableau on your second page and a random bullet point, it's just, you're not probably going to be seen as a qualified candidate. I might not see it. So keeping those qualification points to the top is very important. The hiring managers, because they'll only see like 5 versus me, which I'll see like 5,000, they are more likely to sit and read and make notes from front to bottom on your resume.
Yeah, that is a great point. And actually, I'm jumping ahead here. We're getting so many great questions. Keep them coming. But we do have a question here that from April and Francine that ask, should a cover letter be included for every application? And I'm going to guess as a recruiter, you say no, right?
No. And I'll say this as quickly as possible. The cover letters are not used the same way as they were years ago. So they used to be used to step your foot up in front of everybody else, to show how great you are and to show that you made that initiative. It's not used that way anymore. It's actually used as a screening question, because when a lot of people go to apply to a job and they see that a cover letter is mandated, they'll click out immediately. And that's what we want. We want people who actually aren't just applying to 50 jobs that day. They're actually taking the time to apply to our job. So it is a screening question. If a company is not asking for it, it's not going to do anything for you. Don't add it. The only time I would add it is if it was mandatory. Companies like Amazon don't even accept them anymore. So it is a very outdated practice and is not always needed. If they're not asking for it, do not send one.
Yeah. And now here's where I'm going to muddy the water, because as the hiring manager, especially for non-technical roles, I love cover letters.
I know.
So I always disagree with guest on this. And it's not because Brittany's wrong. Recruiters usually don't read cover letters because it doesn't necessarily tell them what they need to know. Everything that they need to know is either in your application or your resume. But since they're looking at, like, let's say 900 applications, it's completely understandable. As someone who might get 10 for a role, I actually like them. And especially because I hire writers, I want to see how they're writing and things like that. So it's almost like a case by case basis. If you think like, oh, I could really show my talent, this is a non-technical role, I could show that I'm really a deep thinker here. And, if you're okay at not being read until you get to the hiring manager, then I say include it. And do you think that's okay, Brittany?
I think that's totally okay. I actually had a candidate recently that, not recently, last year, that we did not have an actual section on the ATS to add a cover letter. So once we did the screening with her, she was going on to the next part of the interview, and she had the hiring manager's email address, and she emailed them and said, hey, I'm really looking forward to meeting you next Thursday. Here's my cover letter so you can learn a little bit about me before then. And I thought that was a really good initiative.
Yeah, and a cover letter, because it used to literally be the cover part of a resume before computers took over the world.
Yes.
It could still just be that email that you send out. It doesn't have to be a separate document. So you have options. But back to the issue at hand, resumes. So as a resume writer and a recruiter, someone who sees both sides of this, if you're sitting down as a job seeker and say, okay, I have a blank page in front of me, I have a resume that's 20 years old, 5 years old, or something like that, how do you start crafting a resume that you think is going to really, get you over the threshold and into a company, or at least the start of the hiring process?
This is a really good question, and I really am happy that you asked this. Even if you have zero resume, pull 6 to 8 job descriptions that you would want to apply to first. Okay. Pull 6 to 8 job descriptions before you even start and start reading those. And you're going to start noticing that they're asking for a lot of the same things. And those things that are coming up multiple times in each job description are the things that you should be plugging into your skill set areas. So again, we're staying away from the soft skills on the resume. That's more of the interview, right? So for when you pull the job description, what you should be looking for is those common variables. So if you see that they're asking for cross-functional team communications, and you're on 4 out of 4 job descriptions, you should probably put that as a bullet point. And, one of the bullet points could be stakeholder, C-level, vendor, and team partnerships or communications or whatever it's looking for. That way you're aligning your actual skill sets with what the job descriptions are looking for. I see a lot of people who will write the resume first and then tweak it to every single job description. But if you are looking in the same industry, or if it's about the same job description, you really should be pulling those job descriptions first. And no matter what senior level or entry level you are, sticking to those years of experience, education, certs, and technologies at the top of your document and not hidden in your resume.
That's great pieces of advice. And yeah, I think so many people, they do sort of a general resume. And a lot of times when I have friends or family who will ask me to help them with their resume, I'll say, okay, well, what positions would you like to apply for? And they'll say, sales. And I'll say, okay, but what kind of sales? Yeah, I did sales. And I'll always say, there's value in actually going a little bit deeper and being more specific, because I can go outside and, I have Fifth Avenue behind me. I can find probably 20 people in 10 minutes that do sales. But if I'm running a company, I want the person who's actually going to sell the product that I need or have the expertise to do that. So I always tell people, make sure you're going a little bit more specific, because it's not just that you need to solve a problem, you need to solve an employer specific problem. So I think the idea of looking at job descriptions is so invaluable. And before we get to questions from our members who are in the comments, what is one thing that you would like people to take away from today about recruiters and resumes? Because there's so much misinformation, and, I want to make sure you have a chance to say, okay, if you take one thing away from today, take this.
If I could take anything between the relationship with recruiters and resumes, I would definitely say that as long as you're getting yourself qualified to the job you're applying for, it doesn't matter if the recruiter likes you. It doesn't matter if you only meet half of the soft skills. We're looking for hard skills. So as long as you're coming off qualified on your document, you will get a screening. But it's also important timing. So do not be applying to jobs that are over 2 weeks old. Usually as a recruiter, I know that we're in the final stages. We're doing interviews. We're not really looking at new applicants at that point. I'm trying to offer somebody. And then once we offer and I solidify that contract, that's when I'll go through and auto reject people. And a lot of those times, those people are qualified. So it's not that you're not qualified, it's timing or you're hiding your qualifications.
I think those are great takeaways. And, especially when it comes to the timing part of it, I think a lot of times people will say, oh, well, this job was posted 2 months ago, but maybe they're still looking. And the odds are they're not, especially in today's job market. So timing is really important. But yeah, no, I think that's fantastic advice. And are you ready to jump into some questions from our members?
Yeah, let's do it.
Great. And actually, before we do that, before I forget, if any of you are unfamiliar with the term hard and soft skills is basically things like programming languages or specific software that you're using. So say you work as a cashier and you work at a specific point of sale system, that would be an example of a hard skill. A soft skill would be something that's not necessarily teachable. You could get better at it, but it would be interpersonal communication. It would be writing, which you can improve at, but it would be like you have a knack for writing. So there's like a difference between those hard technological teachable skills and those more natural humanistic skills. So that's the difference between those two. But Brittany, you mentioned before about like changing your resume for each job. And Lance wants to know a little bit about that. So should you be adjusting your resume for each job? And if so, how much? Should you not worry about that if you've really written a good resume based on job descriptions? What are your thoughts?
My thoughts are it gets really dangerous when you start tweaking so much of your document for every single job description. It is a waste of time because you should not be taking out any skills at all from your background. What you should be doing is minimizing it or highlighting it more or less. But when you're pulling those 6 to 8 job descriptions, you should know exactly which skills you should be highlighting and more and less. That's why it's really important to pull those first. But yeah, I mean, for tailoring every single job description, I'd be like, okay, what skill sets are you taking out? Why are you thinking that those aren't as great as the other skill sets? So what I would say is when you are pulling those job descriptions, you should be highlighting already what those top industry or titles are looking for. And it should be very easy for you then to just apply. You can tweak cover letters, that's fine. But I mean, if you're in medical sales and you're applying to a whole bunch of medical sales companies, I really don't see why you should be taking out certain medical products or skill sets. That does not make any sense to me. A lot of people assume that it doesn't apply. I'm like, it does apply. You just don't talk about it as much.
Yeah, and sometimes actually the more unique you are for the role, like say you have experience in a few areas, that can be seen as valuable because diverse experience can really win the day when it comes to certain businesses. And I think there was a story several years ago in the Wall Street Journal about someone who was applying for finance jobs and put at the bottom of their resume that they were a world champion in poker or something like that. And actually, that was really weird, but super relevant because the banks, the finance companies were looking for someone who's really good with risk. So I remember that stuck out to me. And there are a few examples of that, but you have to be smart about it. Keep an open mind, but don't let your brain fall out is the famous saying.
You have to be looking for those things. Some recruiters immediately won't see the relevance, but when you actually sit down and read some of these skill sets, it's great. Now, if you're applying for finance, would I put that you were a track star or baseball? Probably not. I would love to know your compliances and if you worked with P&L or, SOX or those types of things. But.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's a good rule of thumb. And we have a question here from John. And John wants to know, is it better to have a chronological resume or a functional resume? And can you also tell us the difference of those? Because I think some people may not know.
Yes, it drives me crazy when people do not put their resumes in date order. So one is in date order from 2010 to present, and the other one is based more on experience. So if you haven't been in the field in the last year, you might pop your previous job to the top versus your current job. However, one of the main qualifications is me checking the years. So if you don't have a summary at the top that says that you have X amount of years of experience, I have to do math. And if your resume is not in order, I'm going, okay, where is the soonest or where's the farthest year? Okay, let me do math. Okay, they actually have 7 years of experience. It's a pain in the butt and it doesn't make you look cool. I'm like, oh my God, this is not organized. So for me, I personally like your most recent job or the recent date. Let me do math if you don't have a summary, because again, I'm looking for qualifications.
Yeah. And actually, there were a few people that I've talked to over the years who, they said that they were trying to remove dates from their experience because they worried about ageism. And I always told them, I said, that's a bigger red flag than anything else, because I said recruiters like to see your progression, and so do hiring managers. So, if you remove the dates or you say eliminate a position that you were at for 3 years, the recruiter will just naturally go, I wonder what they were doing for those 3 years. So I always think that sends up a red flag for a lot of people when either there are dates missing, there's a large gap, and for people who have a career gap, would you suggest putting something that says, sabbatical 1 year or something like that to fill in those gaps?
Yeah, some people worry about job gaps for like no reason. They'll say like, "Oh, I had 6 month gap or I had a 3 month gap." I'm like, okay, those aren't the type of gaps we're looking for. And honestly, just remove the months then, because it's gonna say like 2020 to 2020. Then, if you were just, you know, if there was like a 3 or 6 month gap, those are not the type of gaps we're looking for. We're looking for like a 5 year gap in technology to where you would have to learn the industry again, or you're in healthcare and you are not up to date on any of the medical compliances or procedures. Those are more of the gaps that we worry about. Even in retail, if you have like a 4 year gap, we are looking at market data. Are you still in line with what the consumer is looking for? So we're looking for years, like 3+ years in gaps. We're not looking for 3 months. We're not looking for 6 months. And if you're worried about that and you've been taking courses or you've done volunteer work during that time, just put that under your education and put the dates. The recruiter will see, like, okay, during this time they went back to school. During this time they did volunteering. I mean, I think a lot of people are worried about that because of what they heard back in the day, but it really is a different structure in how we look at resumes in this day and age.
Definitely. And we have a question here from Francine that is fantastic because obviously there are a lot of people who worry about ageism, and
Mhm.
ageism is one of those things that you can't necessarily quantify, but it's out there, even if people say it, oh, we don't do that. But Francine says, is years experience greater than 20 years beneficial, or is it a deterrent as it signifies age? So should people be worried about that? Should they put maybe a career summary for things that are older than 20 years in their career? How should people approach that?
Ageism is real. It is absolutely real, especially in any technology industry. So for ageism, I never on my resumes put anything over 25+ years, because most of the industries will not be asking for anything more than 22 plus, especially for like stakeholdership. It's usually around 17. So 25 plus is what you leave it at. Don't get in the 30s, don't get into the 27s. But when you think about what ageism is, it is the uneducated thought that based on your age, you cannot do the role. So that usually, when I think about that, I think about, okay, they're too old to learn technologies or softwares or new a learn trick or process. So that's why it's really important to put those technologies and compliances and policies and softwares up at the top, because it mitigates that thought of like, hey, is this person going to know software? Well, they just listed 15 softwares right at the top of their resume. That kind of mitigates that ageism. Also, take the dates off your education. It's not needed. I just need to know that you have one most of the time. So with ageism, don't list anything over 25. At least in your top summary, you can say you're a leader of 25+ years. Keep your technologies, your softwares, and the most recent policies, procedures, or laws up at the top, and you'll mitigate what we're worried about.
Yeah, I think those are really great pieces of advice. I always also say, especially if you're worried about ageism, own your age, because a lot of times, if well, actually, it's not even a lot of times, all the times, it comes with value to the employer. So don't think of it necessarily as it's going to hinder your job search. Think of it as the value add is going to bring to the employer. You can't be arrogant about it, but you could walk in there and say, listen, I did problem solving skills, and you could use the examples from those days. So I always try and remind people, don't go in there thinking that your age is necessarily going to be in the minus column. Think of it as the ad, and that's how you sell it, I think. At least
Yeah.
in my opinion. And I think we have time for one more question, and it comes from Diana. And I think this is the question that everyone always wants to know about resumes. How do you make a resume pop?
Don't. Please. Please. I will see pictures and columns and all this stuff. And every time I see it, I think, wow, you must have had a really hard time applying to this job or at parsing. You must have had to go through each section and fix it again. Um, no matter how gorgeous your resume, it could smell like perfume and reek of glitter and have llamas all over it. I would be like, oh my God, this is the coolest resume I've ever seen. And if you don't qualify, I cannot legally put you forward. One, it would show that I'm favoring you because you had a pretty resume, and that's against EEOC, and I could be sued, and then the company can be sued. I'm not going to lose my job because of a pretty resume. It does not matter. You are not handing this to someone physically anymore. That is an old ideology. Keep your template as simple as possible. Keep your qualifications to the top. I could care less what kind of template it is, as long as I can read it and as long as your qualifications are up at the top.
Got it. So, Brittany, if I understand what you're saying, I won't get a job as a software engineer if I just show a recruiter a pretty picture?
Yes. And that's really funny because I actually received a picture the other day that said, I am very handsome and well educated. I know that I could bring value to your company. And I was like, okay, well, if I responded to you, that's illegal because you brought up your looks and your education immediately. So these types of things can actually hurt you because it puts the recruiter in a situation of like, okay, if a government official came in, are they going to see this person's qualifications or this gorgeous man that just sent me a picture?
Well, at the very least, I don't, he has this high self-esteem, so I'm pretty sure he probably dusted himself off and kept going. But Brittany, thank you so much for your time. I hope people are following you on LinkedIn. We've been flashing your URL at the bottom. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. This is fun.
Yeah, no, it's been a fantastic conversation for me as well. Thanks so much. And thank you, everyone who joined us. And I know you learned so much. Brittany is such a wealth of information. And, don't worry, we will be back next week. In fact, my colleague, Brandy Fowler, will be here. She will be talking to Revolt CEO, Detavio Samuels, who will join her and talk about how to get a job in the entertainment industry. And that's Friday, December 16th at 12 p.m. Eastern Time. We'll be dropping the link to the show in the comments so you can RSVP. And obviously, it'll be on the LinkedIn news page for you to RSVP as well. And then also, if you cannot wait till Friday, do not worry, because I also produce a podcast that is weekly. So you can head to a link that our producers will drop in the comments as well. It's called Get Hired with Andrew Seaman. So you can navigate to that link that's in the comments, and you can find us on Apple Podcasts, or you can search for Get Hired in wherever you like to listen. This week's episode, I chat with Jenny Blake about making a career pivot, but there's an archive of dozens of other shows that you can also listen to. So make sure you check that out as well. As always, I want to thank everyone who makes the show possible. We have Gianna, we have Elias, we have Derek, we have Scott, and a very special thank you to Florencia Iriando, who's head of original audio and video for LinkedIn News. She just passed a citizenship test today, and this will be the last time on the air while she's at LinkedIn. So I want to give her a very big thank you for giving me the opportunity to be here. It's because of her that I get to have this show. I will miss her dearly, but I just want to wish her the best of luck. She's incredibly talented, and I know she's off to do amazing things. And thank you all, like I said, for joining us. And make sure to take care of yourself. In some places, it's getting cold out there. The virus is still going on. You can only get hired. You can only be a good candidate if you're safe and well enough to do so. So until next time, stay well and best of luck.